Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Born and dead, saved by love. Count my blessings from above. Though in darkness, have no fear. Light will shine on those holding near. They know that sorrow they will pass. For I know in this life there will be something. But remember that love, yes it will. Love will reign. Yeah. Love will reign. Yeah. In my heart, I believe it. Love will reign. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Have a vision. It's clear and plain. People living life, smiling again. Oh, see the children, they know no pain. Far from pressure, stress and strain. Oh, sorrow, they will pass. For I know in this life there's gonna be some pain. But remember that love, yes it will. I know. Yeah. Love will reign. Gotta believe it. In my heart, I truly believe. Sun will shine again, and love, I can hardly wait. In the light of love, we'll all be together. There'll be peace, peace, sweet peace.
Love will reign. I am so excited to be here. I'm always excited to share with you on the Love and Stuff platform, whether we're here live on Love and Stuff with us. We're excited to be here on Marcus Holmes, the Love Activist. And I'm excited to have all of you that are joining across platforms. So take a moment and click share, tag someone to join you, someone that's within your circle and who is um, concerned about what's happening in our world, especially for those of you that are in the US, in the United States, in the political realm. And just to give you a little backdrop, as you may remember, Love and Stuff many years ago was born out of conversations around social justice and around political justice, I'll call it. And from that, it has evolved into a wonderful community of people, a few of them who are going to be joining us tonight, who are upping their love game in the area of social justice, in the area of ensuring that their voices are heard, that they raise those voices for the causes and purposes that are important to them. And if ever a time to raise your voice, this is the time and the season. And I know you've heard that before, but I think, unlike many times, not only is this experiment of America being tested and democracy being tested, I think it's on the ballot. And so I wanted to continue our series. This is part two, as we are a little technical difficulty between Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, and Donald Trump, former President Trump. And so we thought it would be great going into that debate to talk about a little bit about how these candidates might line up on issues that are important to you. So I hope that you will click share and tag some folks to join us in this discussion as I bring from the Love and Stuff community two brilliant minds, wonderful minds, Valencia Etner, Dr. Valencia Etner, and Pastor Darren Williams. Welcome. Thank you both for joining me tonight. I appreciate you.
He'll be back.
And he's back.
And he's
In and out. So I think it's all popping. I think that's what's happening. So I wanted to thank you, first of all, for being here. And do you agree that this is a historic debate tonight that we're going to be going into? Is it historic to you?
It's historic for some very obvious reasons, but then some very not so obvious.
Okay. I'm going to double back after I ask Darren the same question. And because I want to know what the obvious, and of course, I'm always curious about the not so obvious. So I love that. So, Pastor Darren Williams, thank you for joining. Is it a historic night?
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having this, Dr. V. Always my pleasure to be in
Always.
your presence. I agree, 100% historic in many senses. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to double back to you on that many senses. I love it. Um, Mama V, Pastor V, Dr. V, I'm going to interchange those all night probably.
That's fine.
Um, why is it obvious? What are the obvious things? And then tell me what's not so obvious to us.
The obvious things is that this is a woman of color and a person who has been um, in the Oval Office, who missed a, didn't win the last time, but has returned again to try to be in the presidency. That in and of itself is different. Very seldom does someone lose and then come back. That doesn't happen often. A woman of color being in this in that seat of presidential nomination is a first. But not only that, no primary process. No, there's a lot of very obvious, like I said, very obvious things that makes this historic. This was a baton pass after, it was already quote unquote kind of conceded that that it was going to be these two elderly gentlemen who were going at it. And then that last debate changed the landscape. And then we got a 3-month process of someone who is, it's not unusual for the vice president to be the person who runs after a president, but this timeline is all very, very different, very historic, very unprecedented, as the word is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But that which is not obvious is that this is America's thirst for hope. And there's a lot of people who will be watching tonight that just really need her to hit a home run.
Mm-hmm.
Because while she may not be talking about the fear that Biden was talking about, that fear is very, very relevant to people.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard more people talking about leaving this country than I've ever heard in my life. If that should be the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
People who are looking at, you've got those who are on Blaxit, not Blexit, but Blaxit, who are the, expatriates who have moved on to other countries and that are living in Dubai, in France, in, all of these other places where they have made good livings.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got that already going on. But to hear so many people say, if she doesn't win, I'm out. I'm gone. I can't stay here under that. And so that in and of itself makes this kind of not what's on the surface, but what's underneath. That there are a lot of people with a lot of hope riding on this. And that matters, and then from, I'm representing with this today, that whole question of, whether she's Black enough or not Black enough, or Indian enough or not Indian enough, or all of those things that are coming to fruition as people say, we just don't know her. Well, if you don't know her, it's your fault. But, you didn't try to get to know her. But we realize that in this country, everything is typically whatever the media presses is what we say we know. And if the media doesn't press it, then we say we don't know. So that's kind of what I mean by some things that are not on the surface.
Okay, that's very helpful. Do you want to add anything to that, Darren?
Let me say it this way, and Dr. V actually did allude to it. What makes this an unobvious reason that makes this historic is because a presidential debate is what brought us to the moment. Okay, that was the stage that actually, presented the issue of Kamala Harris getting to be here. I think the fact also that this becomes, with female president, it becomes a shift in the whole political dynamic in America. All right, understanding how influential corporations are in the political system, that means that not just the social mores has changed, but from the world of business, from the corporatocracy, there is a shift in the idea of leadership in the country too.
Wow. So I want to delve in. I love it. And I want to delve in because there are people in and around Love and Stuff who have done their research and some that haven't. Some have just heard sound bites. We become a world of sound bites where we listen to whatever is posited on social media by whichever side, and we make our decision based on that. There are some who have done that. Of course, there are some who delve deeper to find out whether or not the facts support the things that they're hearing on social media.
Right.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because there are many different areas that I want to touch on as quickly as I can. but one of them is crime. I want to talk to you about where do you see these two candidates as it relates to their positions on crime. I think it's a major issue, and one of the things that I'm really concerned is about our young people and the way that they are being involved or interacting with crime. Of course, I know there are many leading indicators as to why. There are many underlying reasons as to why we see crime in the way that we do. But how do you see these candidates being the same and or different as it relates to crime?
Darren, you want to go?
I will. Very different, obviously, with Vice President Harris's background as a prosecutor, as an attorney general. She represents law and order. She represents law enforcement, okay, on the high level, on the policy level. She represents that. Part of her speech the other night and in some of the other campaign stumps, she's talked about how her job was to prosecute people like the other candidate. So that's one sense that she stands on justice. All right. She's part of the system of, I love what Brian Stevenson calls it. She's a part of the system of criminal justice. However, I think a real, and I don't even have the adjective to describe, but the fact that a candidate for president is a 34-time convicted felon who is awaiting sentencing, whose Supreme Court, his party stacked, has ruled that what a president does in office, with him in mind, they ruled that he cannot be prosecuted for, he cannot be held accountable for. And then, with this candidate having the mindset before any of those things occurred, that he is above the law. I think in those two dynamic ways, we see contrast with their position on crime and punishment. And then should we visit his history in the sense of at least the case of the Central Park 5?
Exonerated 5, yes.
Exonerated 5, please. Yes. The updated version. Thank you so much, Dr. B. Where he literally, personally took out a full-page ad, not just in the interest of pursuing legal means of punishment for these men, but to reinstitute the death penalty. Okay, so his page, the ad he took out was about changing policy on crime, and so I'm polar kind of realities with them too as it relates to crime.
I think that there's a few other things when in digging deeper that we can look at as well. Yes, she is law and order, but she was also law and order in a way where people see prosecutors as just those who put people in jail. And she has a really common sense way of looking at prosecution for those persons who are like our young people, as you're talking about, who have not had who have not been, their rap sheet is not long. They have not done a lot of things. She got in trouble as prosecutor because they called her the social worker prosecutor, because she wanted to try to save some of those persons. And so there's an interesting way she looks at law and order, and as it relates to the lives of people. And so I think that we can't, it's easy to just say prosecutor, but not look underneath the surface at some of the things she tried to do. On the other hand, I lived in New York when that slumlord and his father were making life difficult for people, especially people of color. And I've never called him anything but a slumlord, even when he was whatever, because I remember the pain of people who couldn't get running water, but were threatened with eviction because it was all about the money. And so you can't have that kind of heart and not think you can get away with everything that you try to get away with. And I think that the criminal justice system, not only the Supreme Court, but just the mere fact that his sentencing gets pushed back. His people are being so concerned about the election that they're forgetting that people all over this country are dealing with being sentenced every day for much less than he is been convicted of. Yet they don't get a pushback. They don't get a stay until after they, celebrate Christmas with their family. I mean, I'm just saying, nobody gets that. So still in the midst of this, there's some elitism and some privilege that keeps showing its ugly head. And so my concern, even as this election begins to rev up, we know in Pennsylvania, they start at the end of the week in voting. My concern is that we try to normalize what's not normal. Even as we ask questions, even as we look at policies, it's not normal. I mean, we're normalizing what's not normal and trying to put him in a box that makes us feel better about the strange and unusual way in which he sees the world.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to be real. We have to not try to be so correct politically in that respect. We got to call this what it is. Yeah. Some of it is absolute lunacy. Yeah. And we have to be able to say that's lunacy, Yeah.
We're talking to Dr. Valencia Adner and Pastor Darren Williams, two of my favorite minds in the Love and Stuff community, though I don't know if I should say favorites. Some might get in trouble with that. And whether you're watching us on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitch or YouTube events, I want you to share this, especially in states that are considered battleground states, which I want to talk to you a little bit about, both of you. But before I pivot to healthcare, because that's the next thing I want to ask you about, where are these candidates, where you see them at relative to healthcare. There's a segment of people saying he's for Black people. Look what he did for Kwame. And I must give my disclaimer that Kwame and I did go to high school together. In case he sees this, he sat behind me in my English class. I won't tell you what happened in English class, but he sat behind me in English class.
You just told us what happened.
Yeah.
I won't tell you the detail.
Okay.
I'll let him tell you. But what do you say when, there are always these sound bites that get interjected as to the narrative of a candidate. What do you say? What things can you maybe point to that he has or has not done, did or did not do for crime, did it or did not do for reform or to help returning citizens, and maybe different than Vice President Harris, if at all?
I was watching Michael Eric Dyson last night, and Dyson, Detroiter, said that people have to be careful not to point to, not to miss the difference between people and policy. And just because he's done a few things for people does not mean that's policy. Does not mean that's his purpose in the way that he governs. It's all smoking. It's all smoking whistles, y'all. It's all that. He is an entertainer. It is his job to be the best show he can be. And so when you think about those people that he is, Kim Kardashian was able to help get I can't remember her name, a Black woman out of jail, that he let Kwame out, that he did, and I'm fine. Whatever that is that allowed them to get out, I just hope they live accordingly to the, to the pardon. But those are people, not policy.
Okay.
Ask the exonerated five how it feels.
Okay.
He didn't have some metamorphic epiphany about how he's going to see people differently. Look at what the people that are part of were a part of his campaign did to Shay and her mother in Georgia. What you don't really care about the policy, and you don't really care about people if it's not transactional. Let's be very clear that we live in a transactional country. We do. I don't like it. It's just the truth. Most of what we do is for something. Very little of what we do is because we know it's right. That is true. We're not in Corinthians. We're not in Philippians. Whatsoever things are lovely. We are not thinking on those things. We're thinking on those things that help us.
We're not in 2 Corinthians. We're not in 2 Corinthians.
We're not in 2 Corinthians. But the point is that we can't keep looking at all of this through some rose-colored glasses. This is real stuff. This is not we'll wake up on November 6th and it'll be business as usual. We just got to see it for what it is. And I'm not a fear monger. I just want us to be responsible. Be responsible for your choices for your life. You know?
Yeah. Darren, did you want to add anything before I pivot?
I'll say this much. I love that don't separate people from policy. I think also you can't separate policy from where the people who make it live. In our world, in our country, the people who make laws, who create policy, don't live where the rest of the country lives. Nope. Okay. And so it takes other influences, it takes other ways for them to determine how they are going to determine policy, especially as they live above, and that's what it is, above where the rest of the country lives. And when somebody like the other candidate, former President Trump, is running again for president, the way he lives, not a career politician, okay, private citizen, but his friends are politicians. He pals around with those people who do make policy, and not in an open and above board relationship, and not an underground relationship. They have a back room relationship. Okay. And so as a person is socialized in that world, then their view of law, of crime and punishment, you've got to know it's worlds apart from everybody else, because they see themselves so differently than anybody else. And so the surprise is about, how he even thinks about what he does. It really shouldn't be a surprise when you really follow how he got to where he is right now.
Yeah. I love that, both of you. I love that. As I'm pivoting into healthcare, thinking about how someone who's socialized in a different world order, I'm going to call it a different realm, is healthcare. Me working in human resources, I see and hear the stories of people who are struggling to take care of families, to do caregiving, to make ends meet as it relates to healthcare, to pay for prescriptions, the cost of prescriptions going up. I've seen it as a caregiver when I was caregiving. And so healthcare is really important to me. A universal almost healthcare is really important to me.
Amen.
But someone who's socialized in another way might not see that need. And so I want to hear, where do you see these two, including, you talked about it earlier, stacking courts so that we can get the outcomes that we want to get, or prevent people from getting the outcomes that they want to get as it relates to reproductive rights and health. Where do you see these two candidates on healthcare?
I'm going to always defer to you, Dr. V.
I got a little one I better attend to, so you're going to answer.
Okay, I will. So let me say this, because at 56 now, I look at policy issues and platform issues very differently than I did before. I mentioned it much earlier. One of the realities that we have to square with, that the same powers that made George W. Bush president twice are the exact same powers that made Barack Obama president twice. Same powers that made Donald J. Trump president once. And I love to say that once. He was a one-third Republican president, first one in a long
One and
time.
done.
Amen. However, what are those interests? It's the corporate structure of the United States of America. What does that mean? That means then that in terms of policy, healthcare, crime, you name the issue, it is subject to what the corporate interests of this country is. APAC, Google that. AP is AC, APAC. All right.
Mhm.
Okay. It is a conglomerate of corporations. Watch this. Who write laws and give them to Congress. And so to understand ourselves, the country as a corporatocracy, both houses of Congress are completely bought and paid for by corporate interests. Okay. So when we're talking healthcare, the question becomes maybe not so much what President whichever will do, but what does Aflac, well, not Aflac, that's insurance. What does these big pharma companies, Pfizer, and what does Moderna, and what do those companies, what interests do they have? Because we have learned, and it's clear to us now, that the influence that they have on even who becomes president, but for sure the policies as it relates to healthcare. Donald Trump, of course, he's influenced by this the rights conservative idea of doing away with healthcare. Listen how foolish
The whole Heritage Foundation and that whole right.
All of that.
Yes.
Listen how foolish that is. More of Republican people who live throughout the rural areas of this country have benefited from
absolutely
the Affordable Care Act.
Absolutely.
Okay. And for him to do away with that is to actually work against his own self-interest in healthcare. And of course,
not really. It's not his self-interest.
No.
It's the interest of
his constituency self-interest. Yes. Thank you for that
followers, because I only call it constituents.
I welcome that. Correction. And so you can go into reproductive rights and all of those kinds of things. Of course, his flip-flop on that, he was for it before he was against it. And so even in later interviews that he's talked about now, he's kind of caught up because he isn't sure where he even stands now.
He has to be in the place that's the most transactional.
Yeah, of course.
It doesn't matter. It's like I feel like he's one of those people who reads the polls every single day. Sure. And wherever the polls say people are going, that's where his policy goes for that day. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
I love the dialogue. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's just and I agree with you that the corporate interests rule in a lot of ways, but I think that I'm at least somewhat comforted by at least one candidate that pushes back, that at least says, this price gouging, this, these big pharma amounts. And granted, there's a group that's against big pharma that is helping to finance being against big pharma. I get that. Mm-hmm. But I guess that for me, the humanitarian efforts matter more. If it's going to be the same, then who's the most humane? Mm. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but if it's going to be the same, then who's the most humane?
Go ahead with your freestyle.
And so if humanity is in your forefront, then for me, that's what's important, because at the end of the day, it's the people. That whole corporate structure is going to be what it's going to be, and they're going to survive no matter who's in that house.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I thought it was interesting what Darren, you were saying about his pals, right? And bought and paid for. Mm-hmm. And then his, Valencia says followers, you say constituency, I'm going to say folks who benefit from the policy. So he's like the puppet between two masters almost, because you've got to serve that interest that's powerful, but you've got the people that are following you almost, I'm going to say blindly. Forgive me, people that
Messianically.
but
Messianically,
Messianically.
which
There's
really
such that dichotomy. Look at it. The top is really benefiting on the drought from the bottom, if there is to be a drought, right? So
Sure.
I that just stood out to me, and I just wanted to make note of that.
it is a biblical moment, because it is very clear that Jesus said nobody can serve two masters. They'll either hate one or love the other, or love the other and hate the one. And the truth of the matter is that what Donald Trump loves is Donald Trump and money.
I was going to say that. Would you sacrifice the love of money or the love of the meaning or people? Right? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. And the love of money is what?
Root of all evil.
Of all evil. I'm talking.
I read that somewhere.
You read it. You read it right, and you probably preached it well.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Dr. Valencia Edner and Pastor Darren Williams. And if you have just tuned in, you need to click share, because I think this is information you want to share with everyone who is voting and people who are saying that they're not voting. Everybody has an issue that is important to them, or maybe more important than other issues. And so you need to educate yourselves, get aware on the issues, and make the choice that you believe is best for you. We hope tonight to just prick your thinking around these issues that might be important. And the next one that I want to move to, which there is a lot of information, maybe misinformation. You know, Facebook gets mad when you use that word, and sometimes they shadow ban you, but misinformation about the economy. Because, you know, both of them had around a 4% unemployment rate, hovered there, but one of them added far more jobs than the other. And so I want to hear from you about the economy, jobs, job creation, gas prices, because people are saying that, boy, they're saying at a point Trump's gas was $3. They call it Trump's gas, $3.18, and now it's $5. And you know, there are no one's counting any of the factors that there are wars happening, there are global disruption, but they're just looking at those dollars. And I'm not mad at anybody who's saying, hey, there was a time I could pay less for gas. I get it.
Yeah.
Inflation, cost of living. Where do you see these, even though we can't really fully say it's Vice President's administration, right? She didn't have an administration to herself, but where do you see these two candidates on the economy?
There.
I love the way you made that clarification that she's vice president, and it's not her economy. It was, right. And I that's notable to me, because their campaign is really trying hard to nail his policies, President Biden's policies, to Vice President Harris. They're really trying to attach what they think are bad and not good things, net-wise, the immigration issue and other things. They're really trying hard to make that stick to her. So I'm glad you actually said that. The economy-wise, and so I need to say this, because I haven't said this yet, that again, I alluded to the fact that at my age now, that my whole view of the political scene is a very different one. Before I really saw myself, or you know, in that role of where as a citizen, the citizen and doing your duty. I'm on a different page now. I'm looking at meta narrative. Okay, when I look at the whole scene. So whatever is behind, or whatever is that influences and controls what the rest of us are subject to. So that's where I see. So let me just this small piece on economy. It is very telling. It is very telling when candidates talk about which, and I just have to say it, they say it, which class of the American public they intend to focus and work on. Okay. And so part of our misconstrual is when middle class is mentioned, and in most people's mind, the idea is somewhere people who are making somewhere between $80,000 up to maybe $150,000, that's middle class. And for and for the lower classes of people, that may be so. But let me say to you that when politicians talk about middle class, they have a whole nother economic bracket in mind. For them, the middle class starts at $250,000
and goes to
and goes up to $500,000. Let me
Yes.
show you one of the indications of that. When Chelsea Clinton graduated college, does anybody remember the first job she got and how much she made?
I don't remember.
It was $250,000 at 21, 23 years old, her first job. And so with that in mind, then we're talking about economy, job creation, and this, that all kind of stuff. That means something different for somebody in a bracket of $250,000 to $500,000. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously, job creation is good. We want that. Sure, we want unemployment to be low. Absolutely, obviously true. But it's people in the middle class and the upper classes that control what that job creation is like and what the differences and shifts in the economy. Where do we see the greatest picture of that? When Barack Hussein Obama was the president of the United States, when those rich conservatives held back their corporations and their spending and their investment into the United States economy. We saw it happen then
in real time. Mm-hmm.
And so in real time, so the market isn't blind. The market isn't the market is influenced and controlled with people who have agendas. Let me say that
way. That's good. That's good. And where those of us under 250, which is most of the people I know on the planet,
it's me.
but not at 25,000 either. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean, I'm talking about those who are between 45 to, to 150. There is a mindset for those persons that even if the policy helps people who are under $400,000, I'm in the number. So as opposed to those who are on the impoverished side, that middle class is kind of like baby boomers. It's a big a big spectrum.
That's right.
So that's where you start getting the lower middle class, the middle class, the upper middle class. But that middle class spectrum is really, really high.
It is.
But if the policy is going to help anyone under $400,000, I realize that there are some people who are between 250 and 400 who are going to get a whole lot more coming in than I am. But I get to be in the number. And I think that for many people, just hearing that if it's under 400,000, even though I've never seen that, I'm grateful because I'm included, as opposed to those who are over 500,000, $1 million, that you give them no tax break, expecting some trickle down effect that has never, ever happened and is not going to.
And that was 35, almost 40 years ago. It's supposed to trickle down. By now,
why would I think that you would have some kind of fiduciary benevolence for me? Why would you?
There you go.
And you won't, because you went through what you went through to get to where you are. And part of the goal of getting there is having the cuts that allow you to not have to pay the kinds of taxes. That's part of the allure to, that dog eat dog, knock them down and push them down as you get to the top. I mean, it's all a mindset.
Yeah.
And so when we think middle class, that's why the middle class especially in election time, it's those $25, those $50,
There you
those
go.
masses, because that's the mass of people in the country. Those are the ones who make the coffers big enough. And so when you got two campaigns, one that is people oriented, one that is panic oriented, and that's really what we're dealing with.
Sure.
People in panic, and the panic people are really just, it's like that campaign speaks to the least common denominator of their lives. Like, aren't you tired of being put down? Aren't you tired of folks in other demographics getting more than you? Aren't you, it's that whole, WS thing. I'm not gonna call it out, but y'all know what I'm saying. That says you, because of your birthright, you have a right to more. It's so 1867. Not 5, 7. As Reconstruction. It's so 1867. But anyway, but because we don't really know all that, we don't even recognize when it's showing its ugly head again. And that's why this same set of people don't want us to, don't want history taught, don't want, bless you, sir, for your day job. Amen. And the fear that has to come along with knowing how far to push that envelope. And I praise God that it's still a separation of church and state. And as long as we do the right thing, it'll stay there. And we can do whatever it is we need to do in these states that want to suppress history. But the point is that all of that speaks to where half of this country is. And it's not even about the person. It's about the rhetoric and the being free to say the vile and nasty things that you've been thinking for years and years and years. It's about that. I feel for young people who have learned how to love people no matter what they look like. And they got to go home and make choices. How dare they do that to them? So it's a cesspool of mess.
Wow.
So we've got to determine that we're going to do what's best for us, because it's too easy to go bury your head in the sand and say, I can't fix none of it. What does my vote count for? Your vote counts because too many of these elections in the state in which you're in, Marcus, those of us in this very,
it's a wrap. It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. We got a little bit going on in Texas. We got a little bit of hope. Because it's been moving toward purple for years, but it just keeps stopping short of that. So it's kind of blue-red, trying to get to purple. But Texas in and of itself is a country. So, but at the end of the day, those, especially in those places where, as we talk about battleground states, you have to know that every single vote makes a difference. You don't get to stay home.
Yeah.
You don't get to say no, because your vote, your non-vote is a vote.
And
Brother Marcus, can I add just 3 historical contextual notes to Dr. V talking about those small donations? The history of this country is that people contributing $20, contributing $15, $10, $5, $1 has put, of course, the first African-American president in the White House, Barack Obama. But the history of this country is that it has actually built some of the corporations in this country and institutions. Oral Roberts University.
Absolutely.
Ask them about it. What's the one? Jimmy Swaggart's place. Ask them about where the money came from to make those places happen. That's one thing. Second thing I want to say is that to contextualize in terms of this thing of middle class and to see how susceptible the president of the United States is to other interests, his salary is $450,000.
Right.
400 for a salary, 50,000 for allowances. Okay, so there's a susceptibility there to be influenced by bigger money. The last thing I want to say is this in terms of the economy. Somebody in the United States of America always got some money. And a whole lot of money. Some of them.
Absolutely.
And then the Bible helps us on the other side that the poor you will always have with you. Why is that true? Because you always gonna have the greedy. That's why you always gonna have the poor. And so when it comes to economy, the president, they've got to have a really honest and compassionate heart. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely. And yes, go after the price gougers. Yes. The reason that the price of gas is up might have a little to do with war, but more than anything, it has something to do with the war of profits. And Exxon is not hurting, and neither is Mobil Oil. They're not hurting at all. They're having record profits off the backs of people, and somebody has to call that out. It's the same way with food prices. These people, pandemic shortage of transport, that's one thing. But now you're trying to make up for all you lost 4 years ago.
There you go.
On the backs of people. That's real stuff.
Yeah.
And we sit and take it instead of saying, I'm going to go without eggs.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
We learned a long time ago what it meant, what boycotting meant. But it's like we have forgotten all of those lessons.
Yeah.
Ask Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola got boycotted. And it was the drink of choice for a whole nation of Black folk.
And for a generation.
And for generations. And we stopped drinking it.
Yeah.
To make a statement.
And the other thing you just said is paramount. You mentioned war. The clear understanding of war, Mr. Johnson, my 7th grade social studies teacher, honor social studies, told our class, war is the greatest business in the world. So so oil obviously is influencing the market and things like that. But war, you got Lockheed Martin, you got Boeing, you got all of these companies that are making missiles, that are making the tanks and all of these things that is fighting in war. Don't misunderstand that is part of the economy and has the greatest influence on it at the same time.
Do you know that Black folk who work for Lockheed?
No.
Never. Oh, I know.
Oh, that do. Oh, that do. Yeah, okay.
That do make money, yeah. They can't talk about.
Sure. I don't know any personally, but yes. They
can't have them like that. They can have that first discussion you had.
Yeah.
They can't have these discussions.
Yeah, then they have to tip out.
They have to just have a humanitarian heart for those who don't make that.
There it is.
And that's the other thing that has changed. And I just want to throw that in there, that African Americans economically are in different places than they were a lot of years ago. Whereas the bulk of us were all under a certain amount, we're spread all over that spectrum now.
That is very true.
And so part of it is that there's a set of African American, especially younger people, who see that pinnacle of finances as the separation point. It's not color anymore. It's not even your grandmama history. It's, I went to school to do this, and this, and I am not trying to hang out with y'all because y'all don't want to get up, and there's no understanding of the fact that you had a grandmama who said, all my children and all my children's children are going to school, where 10 other people on your block couldn't pull that off. And so it's that entitlement. We don't have elitism, but we definitely have entitlement that is running around in our community, and that's making people feel like they don't live the same lives that we do, that others do that are of color. But I keep telling them, walk in somewhere where nobody knows you.
Yeah. I call it
And
the
where it
H.
doesn't matter what your clothing look like.
I call it the HNS syndrome. I'll
Yep.
leave it there.
Yep. Yep.
We're at 8:54, and I wanted to touch because I know people vote issues, right? People
Yes.
vote the issues that matter to them, and I wanted to touch on education because both of you are educators.
Yes.
And that's where I wanted to land because, and I'm fascinated, and we'll have to talk more about this meta narrative. I think that is,
Yes, sir.
that's worth a webinar.
Yeah,
And I
it is.
think that could get you to 400,000. I'm just saying what I'm saying. You could be in the 400, both of you could be in the 400,000 the way you're talking. And I hope people on LinkedIn are hearing this because they could be available for webinars out there. All right.
Absolutely.
But where do you see these candidates on education? I know we're going to talk in weeks to come about Project Disaster. I'm not going to call it Project Disaster. Where do you see these
Project
candidates?
Annihilment, Project Catastrophe,
Project Take the Freedom, Project Take the Country, Project New Experiment, right?
Yes.
Where do you see education?
I'm gonna go first because you're in it right now, and I'm gonna talk about it from where I sit, even pastorally where I sit.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't determine that the education of our children goes beyond 8 to 3 in our communities, we will continue to have the kind of staggering statistics. Article came out over the weekend or last week about the statistics in Texas schools. Our children are well below the 20 percentile. Yes, COVID had something to do with it. Yes, we were ill prepared to help them during COVID. Yes, fear stopped us from doing some things we probably could have done on our local and our church level, on our community organizations level. But the bottom line is that we are at a point now that if we don't determine that it's not only on the teachers, but on everybody else as well, we're not going to be able to save them from 10 years from now being so far behind those who are in schools of choice, those who are homeschooled. We're going to look at a time where, and especially if any of this Project Catastrophe happens, we're going to look at not having young people who are part of the African American community being able to compete for anything. For anything, that not those who are in the public school arena. And so we've got to decide that it's no longer an option. And that we got to join forces, we got to join hands, we got to open these schools, we got to open these churches, we got to open these churches to people who are in college, who are education majors, and let them do internships and bring them into these communities. If we don't do it, and if we don't get churches who support us doing it, as pastor, I can say it all day long. But if I don't have a fellowship that will say, yeah, pastor, we got to do it, then I'm taking a walk by myself. And that's just no longer an option. If we don't become the bastion of our communities again, we can forget it. We will not be able to save our people. And I'm not willing. I'm pretty Esther on that. If I perish, let me perish. But it's a fight.
Yeah.
It's a fight, and we gotta say we're no longer willing to just watch it. That's where I am.
Okay.
Pastor Darren.
I think, amen. Amen. And I think the last piece you did where I'm a segue is about us being the bastion in our community, about the whole community impact, input, involvement in what is education. But this is a backward segue to what you said on in terms of as African Americans, how advancement in some of our community, where there are some who are making in a high level, a high bracket of income, where the rest, that is good and it is bad.
Mhm.
And I think that has a influence on education in a
Yes, it
way
does.
that is crippling. So let me say these things. That the question becomes if education has the same value for us that it has had
Mhm.
before.
Mhm.
And in that, how are we being educated? It's important for the conservative minded people of the country to keep the country dumb and ignorant.
Right.
It's important for them to do that. And when you look at the figure who's leading that philosophy, you can see that that's important and that's true. However, on the other side, I'm not sure that progressive liberal thinking people have
Mm.
really done with education what
Right.
is most meaningful for us. And so I'll say this and then I'm through. Um, our people are educated to work for somebody.
You're
Okay.
correct.
And as long as you work for somebody, that means somebody's always going to decide, make the decisions for how you live. Now, they'll pay you your money,
Yep.
but in terms of how much you make, then the decisions are made about how you are going to live. I think in this, and you said again, Dr. V, you said it. Our country, there's a vacuum in education. That there's a lot of holes in it, but there's a vacuum for what is true. Because, and that's what the whole piece of holding back or resisting and not wanting to teach history. Because when you pull the cover off of Black history, everybody is exposed.
Everybody's exposed.
Even the reason why there's a cover over it in the first place.
Absolutely.
And our crisis in the country, is because we keep trying to make education the answer. Education is not the answer. It is part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Unity and leadership for our people is the answer. Because the people who own and control everything,
Yeah.
how do they get it? Our system is a capitalist system.
Yeah.
Their parents hand it to them. They inherit that. Okay? We don't have
generational wealth.
Let me stop. Education is in the discussion, but it is not our
It
answer.
is in the discussion. I've always been a prime believer in this, and I think that our young people miss this. They want to be entrepreneurs, but they never want to work for anyone. My thing is go to work, learn everything you can.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth. Don't try to figure out what you can gain in your, in the accoutrements of your apartment.
Yeah.
Just live pretty simply.
Yeah.
Learn all you can. Give yourself the 5-year plan. Get out.
There you go.
And build your own.
There you go. And
that's
let me correct.
What I tell them all.
And let me correct myself. I say education. I mean formal education, because what Dr. V is talking about is education.
Absolutely.
My understanding of education is not going to school, sitting in a classroom. It's inclusive of that. But
And
it's how you take your exposure and experiences and direct them towards a better future for yourself. That's education to me. And you get it anywhere you are.
Yeah. It's just like we were taught to go to work.
That's it.
We were taught to go to work. And Marcus, my wish for you is that you had come around 10 years later.
Wow.
Because there would be no overhead place. You would be HR. You would be that company where Black folks can learn what they need to learn. You know, but again, we came around in a time where it says, get that, get your retirement. And I pray to God that you retire young enough to do it anyway.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah. So that someone else younger can see what it is. We miss it. I tell my family all the time, we miss the mark. Everybody has these gifts and they've all done these things. But if we'd ever sat down and said, how do we build Allen Enterprises? You know?
Wow.
So think on these things.
These are things to think on.
And we must return to this. So
yes, this is a continuing conversation and we might have to come back because again, I think that there are people who are seeking out, you know, what to be considering and some people aren't considering what should be sought out, I think. And so hopefully people will latch on to some of the great gems that you've dropped here tonight and continuing the conversation. Of course, you can follow Dr. Valencia Etner. She is V Encouragement Ministries. You can follow her for Power in the Word there. You can follow Pastor Darren Williams, who is the pastor of First Baptist Church of Okmulgee. Did I say it correctly?
First Baptist Central.
Central. Thank you.
Yes.
Carter Metropolitan CME, Fort Worth. Carter Metropolitan CME, Fort Worth, Texas.
There you go. There you go. Follow them both. Keep the dialogue going, and we will be back. I hope that everybody will go watch the debate and then drop comments and let us know.
They have started, and my sources say he's going to get the last word. So let's go and pray for what we.
Yes. All right. Thank you both for joining tonight.
Bless you. Good to see you, Darren. Good to see you, Marcus.
Likewise.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Always grateful for them. They are great minds. And I hope that you will join us in the comments as the debate is happening. We want you to be engaged in what you're voting for. Sure, the issues as you see them, you should consider those. But there are so many other areas of context that you should consider that color, that inform the issues that matter to you. And where do the candidates stack up? Take a listen and find out. I'm Marcus Holmes, and whether you're watching us on LinkedIn Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, YouTube events, or Facebook Live, it's Love and Stuff. And it's a community that wants to up our love game, even social justice and political, from a political standpoint, so that we can be good citizens. We can do our best to ensure that our world is a better place than where we found it. See you soon.